The invasion fleet descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars, their crystalline hulls gleaming against the burning sky. Admiral Zexter watched from the command bridge of his flagship, mandibles clicking with satisfaction. The humans had lasted longer than most species, but their resistance was finally crumbling. "Status report," he commanded, his four arms working the holographic displays. 70% of major population centers have fallen, Admiral, his tactical officer reported. The remaining human military forces have retreated to mountainous regions. Our ground forces estimate complete pacification within 3 rotations. Zexter nodded. The Cathurian Empire had conquered 47 worlds, and Earth would be another simple addition to their collection. Humans were resilient, he admitted, but they lacked the advanced technology and unified command structure needed to truly threaten his forces. On the surface below, General Marcus Chen crouched in the bombed-out remains of what had once been Colorado Springs. His uniform was torn and dirty, his face marked with 3 days of stubble and exhaustion. Around him, the scattered remnants of the North American Defense Coalition huddled in underground bunkers, their equipment a patchwork of salvaged military gear and civilian weapons. "Sir, we're getting reports from all sectors," Lieutenant Rodriguez said, his voice strained. "The aliens are advancing on all fronts. We've lost contact with the European and Asian commands." Chen studied the tactical display, watching red markers advance across the digital map like blood spreading through cloth. Each marker represented thousands of enemy troops, their energy weapons and powered armor cutting through human defenses like paper. "How many operational units do we have left?" Chen asked. "Maybe 3,000 combat-ready personnel across the entire Western Front. Most of our heavy equipment is gone. We're down to small arms and whatever we can scavenge." The general closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of humanity's survival pressing down on his shoulders. When he opened them again, his jaw was set with determination. "Any snipers?" he asked suddenly. Rodriguez looked confused. "Sir." "Do we have any long-range specialists left? Anyone who might be able to take out their field commanders?" The lieutenant scrolled through their personnel roster, what little remained of it. "We have maybe a dozen marksmen scattered across different units. Most lost their rifles in the retreat, though." Chen was about to respond when a voice spoke from the shadows near the bunker entrance. "I'm here." Everyone turned to see a woman emerging from the darkness. She was unremarkable at first glance, perhaps 30 years old, with short brown hair and the lean build of someone who spent time outdoors. Her clothing was civilian hiking gear, modified with military webbing and pouches. What caught their attention was the massive rifle slung across her back. "And you are?" Chen asked. "Elena Vasquez, former Marine Scout sniper. Been tracking your unit for 2 days." Rodriguez frowned. "Ma'am, this is a restricted military area. Civilians need to." "She's not civilian," Chen interrupted, recognizing something in the woman's bearing. "Are you Sergeant Vasquez?" Elena's lips curved slightly. "Actually, it's Master Gunnery Sergeant, and I brought something that might interest you." She unslung her rifle and set it carefully on the table. The weapon was unlike anything they'd seen, a hybrid of human engineering and salvaged alien technology. The barrel was nearly 5 feet long, and strange energy conduits ran along its length, pulsing with a faint blue light. "Where did you get that?" Chen breathed. "Built it myself from parts I took off a crashed alien patrol craft. Figured if their energy weapons can punch through our armor, maybe I could work the same trick in reverse." Rodriguez stepped closer, studying the weapon. "Does it work?" Elena's smile turned predatory. "Only one way to find out, but I'll need a target worth the shot, something that will hurt them more than just taking out another patrol." Chen looked at the tactical display again, then back at the mysterious woman who had appeared like an answer to his desperate prayer. Hope flickered in his chest for the first time in days. "What's your maximum effective range, Gunny?" "With this setup, 4,000 meters. Maybe more if I can get elevated position and favorable wind." The general's eyes widened. Even the best military snipers rarely engaged targets beyond 2,000 meters. But looking at Elena Vasquez, seeing the quiet confidence in her stance, he found himself believing. "Then let's find you something to shoot at." 3 hours later, Elena lay prone on a rocky outcropping 12,000 feet above sea level. The wind whipped through the mountain peaks, carrying the acrid smell of burning cities from the valleys below. Through her modified scope, she could see the alien staging area sprawling across what had once been Denver International Airport. "Target confirmed," she whispered into her radio. "Large command vessel approximately 4 clicks northeast of the main terminal." General Chen's voice crackled back through the encrypted channel. "Are you certain that's their command ship?" Elena adjusted her scope's magnification, studying the vessel's distinctive markings and the constant stream of smaller craft moving to and from it. "Traffic patterns confirm it. Plus, it's the only ship with those antenna arrays. That's where their field commander is operating from." She'd spent the morning hiking up the treacherous mountain path, her gear weighing nearly 80 pounds. The altitude made every breath a struggle, but Elena had trained in worse conditions. The Marines had taught her that the impossible shot wasn't about the equipment, it was about the person pulling the trigger. Below, the alien forces moved with mechanical precision. Their crystalline armor caught the sunlight like deadly prisms, and their energy weapons hummed with barely contained power. She counted at least 2,000 troops in the immediate area, with more arriving every hour. Elena pulled out a small device that looked like a modified smartphone and began taking measurements. Wind speed, humidity, temperature, barometric pressure, every variable that would affect her shot. The alien technology she'd incorporated into her rifle was powerful, but it still had to obey the laws of physics. "Gunny, what's your assessment?" Chen asked. "Winds tricky at this distance, gusting between 15 and 20 knots from the southwest. Temperature differential between my position and the target is about 40 degrees, but the real problem is the target itself." "Explain." Elena studied the command ship through her scope. The vessel was roughly the size of a football stadium, hovering 50 feet above the ground on some kind of anti-gravity system. Its hull shimmered with what appeared to be energy shielding. "Their ships have defensive screens. I can see the distortion around the hull. A conventional round would be deflected or absorbed before it reached the target." Silence stretched across the radio for a long moment. Then Chen's voice returned, heavy with disappointment. "So we're back to square one." "No, sir, I said a conventional round wouldn't work, but this isn't conventional ammunition." Elena opened a small case beside her rifle and withdrew what looked like a metallic bullet the size of a small flashlight. The projectile gleamed with the same blue energy that pulsed through her weapon's conduits. "Remember that alien patrol I mentioned? Their weapons use some kind of exotic matter that phases through conventional shielding. I managed to reverse engineer it into ammunition. If I'm right, this round will pass through their energy barriers like they're not there." She loaded the round into her rifle's chamber and activated the weapon's power systems. The energy conduits flared brighter, and she could feel the rifle humming with barely contained force. "Distance to target is 4,100 meters, she reported. "Slight upward angle to compensate for the ship's elevation, wind correction calculated and dialed in." Through her scope, she could see movement on the command ship's bridge. Tall, insected figures in elaborate armor moved back and forth, their movements suggesting urgent planning sessions. One figure stood apart from the others, gesturing at holographic displays with 4 articulated arms. "I think I have eyes on their field commander," Elena whispered. "Can you make the shot?" Elena controlled her breathing, feeling her heart rate slow to the steady rhythm she'd learned in sniper school. The rifle felt alive in her hands, alien technology merged with human determination. She adjusted her position slightly, settling into the perfect firing stance. The wind gusted, then died. For a moment, the mountain was perfectly still. "Shot coming," she breathed. Elena's finger found the trigger, applying steady pressure. The crosshairs settled on the bridge of the alien vessel, 4 kilometers away. She could see the commander clearly now, its insectoid head turning toward what might have been a communications station. Time seemed to slow. Every lesson from her Marine training crystallized into this single moment. Every hour spent on the range, every impossible shot she'd made in combat, every failure that had taught her to be better, it all led to this. The rifle fired with a sound like thunder and lightning combined. The energy round streaked across the distance faster than any conventional bullet, leaving a brief trail of ionized air in its wake. Elena watched through her scope as the projectile covered the 4-kilometer distance in less than 2 seconds. The round struck the alien commander center mass, the exotic matter passing through the ship's shielding as if it didn't exist. The effect was immediate and devastating. The commander crumpled, its four arms flailing once before going still. For a moment, nothing changed. Then chaos erupted across the alien staging area as soldiers rushed toward the command ship, their formation dissolving into confusion. Elena smiled grimly and reached for her second round. Target down, reloading for follow-up shots. Admiral Zexter felt the command ship shudder beneath his feet and knew immediately that something had gone catastrophically wrong. The bridge crew was shouting in 3 different languages, their mandibles clicking in distress as warning lights bathed the command center in crimson. "Report," he barked, his 4 arms working frantically at the tactical displays. "Field Commander Crixtal is down," his communications officer screamed. "Something penetrated our shields and took him out. The ground forces are in complete disarray." Zexter's blood ran cold. Their shields were supposedly impenetrable to human weapons. Every analysis of Earth's technology had confirmed their superiority in defensive systems. Yet somehow, impossibly, a human had just killed his field commander from what appeared to be extreme range. "How is that possible? What weapon could penetrate our shielding?" Before anyone could answer, another impact rocked the ship. This time, Zexter watched in horror as his tactical coordinator simply ceased to exist, vaporized by another impossible shot from the mountains. "Evasive maneuvers," he commanded. "Get us out of whatever firing solution they have." The massive command ship lurched skyward, its antigrav systems straining to break whatever targeting lock the humans had achieved. But it was too little, too late. On her mountain perch, Elena tracked the ship's movement with practiced ease. The vessel was large and unwieldy, its evasive maneuvers predictable to someone who understood physics and trajectory calculation. She led the target slightly, adjusting for the ship's acceleration, and fired her 3rd round. This shot punched through the command ship's engine section, and Elena smiled with satisfaction as she watched one of the antigrav projectors explode in a shower of sparks. The ship listed heavily to port, struggling to maintain altitude. "3 for 3, she reported to Chen. "The command ship is crippled and their ground forces are scattering. I count at least 50% of their troops abandoning their positions." General Chen's voice carried a note of amazement. "Outstanding work, Gunny. Can you keep them pinned down?" "For a while, but I've only got 7 more rounds of the exotic ammunition. After that, I'm back to conventional ordnance." Elena chambered her 4th round and swept her scope across the staging area below. The aliens were trying to reorganize, but their command structure had clearly collapsed. Some units were retreating toward their landing zones, while others seemed frozen in place, waiting for orders that would never come. She selected a new target, a large communications array that was probably coordinating between ground forces and the orbiting fleet. The shot was slightly easier at 3,800 meters, and Elena put the exotic round directly through the array's central processor. The effect rippled across the alien forces immediately. Communication chatter died, and she could see soldiers looking around in confusion as their coordinated advance ground to a halt. "Communications array is down," she reported. "They're operating blind now." "Roger that. We're beginning our counterattack. All remaining units are moving to exploit the confusion." Elena watched through her scope as human forces emerged from hidden positions throughout the valley. They were vastly outnumbered, but the aliens' disorganization gave them a crucial advantage. Small teams of soldiers moved with purpose, targeting isolated enemy squads and abandoned equipment. A new movement caught her attention. 3 alien aircraft were rising from the landing zone, their sleek forms heading directly toward her mountain position. Someone had figured out where the shots were coming from. "I've got incoming," Elena said calmly. 3 bogies looks like interceptors." "Can you relocate?" "Negative. Too much gear to move quickly, and I need the elevation for these shots." Elena chambered her 5th round and tracked the lead aircraft. "Besides, they want to dance, let's dance." The interceptor was moving fast, maybe 300 miles per hour, weaving through the mountain peaks as it climbed toward her position. Elena calculated lead time and elevation change, then settled into her firing position. The shot was unlike any she'd ever attempted. Hitting a moving aircraft at 4,000 meters with a single projectile required perfect timing and a healthy dose of luck. But as she watched the alien craft through her scope, Alina felt the familiar calm that came before impossible shots. She fired just as the interceptor crested a ridge, the exotic round streaking across the distance in a brilliant blue line. The projectile struck the aircraft's cockpit, and Alina watched with satisfaction as the craft tumbled out of control, crashing into a mountainside in a ball of orange flame. The two remaining interceptors immediately broke off their attack run, clearly unwilling to face whatever weapon had just downed their wingman from impossible range. "Splash one bandit," Alina reported. "The others are withdrawing." But even as she spoke, she could see more aircraft rising from the alien base. Word was spreading through their forces that a human sniper was wreaking havoc from the mountains, and they were responding with everything they had. Alina looked at her remaining ammunition, 6 exotic rounds left. She could make each shot count, but eventually they would overwhelm her position through sheer numbers. Still, every minute she kept their attention focused on her was another minute for General Chen's forces to capitalize on the chaos. She selected another target, what appeared to be a fuel depot surrounded by parked vehicles. If she could create a secondary explosion, it might buy even more time for the human counterattack. Alina settled behind her rifle, feeling the familiar weight of the weapon against her shoulder. The aliens had superior technology, greater numbers, and orbital support. But they had underestimated one crucial factor: a human being who refused to accept defeat. The depot exploded in a massive fireball when her 6th shot found its mark, taking out dozens of parked vehicles and sending a pillar of black smoke into the sky. Through her scope, she could see alien soldiers diving for cover as burning fuel spread across their staging area. "That's what you get for picking a fight with Earth," she whispered, already selecting her next target. Admiral Zexter stared at the tactical display in growing disbelief. In the span of 30 minutes, his perfectly organized invasion force had descended into complete chaos. One human, a single individual with an impossible weapon, had crippled his command structure and shattered the morale of troops who had conquered dozens of worlds. "Sir, we're receiving emergency transmissions from Fleet Command," his communications officer reported, all 4 hands working frantically at his station. "They're demanding an explanation for the tactical situation." Zexter's mandibles clicked with frustration. How could he explain that their supposedly invincible forces were being held at bay by one human with a rifle? The High Command would think he'd lost his mind. "Tell them we've encountered unexpected resistance. Human technology appears more advanced than our initial assessments indicated." It wasn't entirely a lie. Whatever weapon the human sniper was using incorporated technology that shouldn't exist. Their exotic matter rounds were passing through Cathurian shields like they were made of paper, and the precision of the shots defied every understanding of human capabilities. "Admiral," his tactical officer interrupted, "we're losing contact with more ground units. The humans are pressing their counterattack, and our forces can't coordinate a proper response without field command." Through the bridge's viewing ports, Zexter could see the smoke rising from what had once been their primary staging area. The fuel depot explosion had spread to adjacent supply caches, creating a conflagration that could be seen from orbit. Worse, the psychological impact on his troops was becoming obvious as more units abandoned their positions. "Order the reserve squadrons to concentrate on finding that sniper," he commanded. "Whatever the cost, that weapon must be eliminated." On her mountain perch, Alina watched 12 aircraft rise from the alien base, their formation tight and purposeful. They were coming for her in force now, and she knew her time was running out. But that was fine. She had accomplished more than she dared hope. "Control, this is Overwatch," she said into her radio, using the call sign General Chen had assigned her. "I count 12 inbound hostiles. This position is about to become untenable." Chen's voice crackled back through static. "Gunny, we can extract you. We've got teams moving toward your position." "Negative, sir. I'm not done here yet." Alina studied the approaching aircraft through her scope. They were flying in a search pattern, trying to pinpoint her exact location. "Besides, your people would never make it up here in time. This is a one-way trip." "Alina, that's an order. Fall back to secondary positions." Alina smiled at the use of her first name. In all her years of military service, She'd rarely heard that kind of personal concern from a commanding officer. But some missions required sacrifices, and she'd made peace with that possibility the moment she'd decided to engage an entire alien army with a rifle and 10 rounds of experimental ammunition. "Sorry, General, can't hear you. Must be interference from all these alien ships." She switched off her radio and focused on the approaching aircraft. 5 rounds of exotic ammunition remained, and she intended to make each one count. The lead aircraft was close enough now that she could see details through her scope, a sleek, predatory design with weapon pods slung beneath its wings. The pilot was probably scanning the mountainside with every sensor at his disposal, looking for the human who had turned their invasion into a nightmare. Alina tracked the aircraft's movement, calculating its speed and trajectory. At this range, she had perhaps a 3-second window when the craft would be in optimal position for a shot. She controlled her breathing, feeling her heart rate slow to its familiar combat rhythm. The aircraft banked into her kill zone, and Alina fired. The exotic round struck the craft's engine section, and she watched with satisfaction as it spun out of control before crashing into a ravine below. The other aircraft immediately scattered, their tight formation breaking apart as they sought to avoid whatever invisible death had claimed their leader. But they were learning. As Alina chambered her 8th round, she noticed the remaining aircraft adopting new tactics. Instead of flying predictable search patterns, they were now moving erratically, using the mountain terrain to mask their approach. 2 of them came around a peak at nearly ground level, flying so low that their landing gear almost scraped the rocky slope. Alina swung her rifle toward them, but they were moving too fast and too close for an effective shot with exotic ammunition. Instead, she grabbed her backup weapon, a conventional .50 caliber rifle she'd carried up the mountain as insurance. The weapon felt crude compared to her hybrid creation, but Alina had been making impossible shots with inferior equipment long before she'd ever seen alien technology. She tracked the lead aircraft as it climbed toward her position, its weapon pods beginning to glow with charging energy. Through her scope, she could see the pilot's insectoid head turning toward her hiding spot among the rocks. Alina fired 3 rapid shots, the massive .50 caliber rounds punching through the aircraft's cockpit canopy. Without exotic matter to phase through alien armor, she couldn't penetrate the pilot's personal shielding, but she didn't need to. The damage to the craft's control systems was enough. The aircraft lurched sideways, its pilot fighting for control as warning lights flashed across his instrument panel. Alina watched as the craft clipped a rock outcropping and cartwheeled into the mountainside, exploding in a ball of brilliant flame. The second aircraft immediately climbed away, apparently deciding that a direct assault on the human sniper was too costly. But Alina knew it was only a temporary reprieve. More aircraft were climbing toward her position, and eventually their numbers would overwhelm her defenses. She switched back to her hybrid rifle and chambered her 9th exotic round. 4 shots remained, and she intended to use them against targets that would maximize damage to the alien war effort. Through her scope, she could see General Chen's forces pressing their counterattack. Human soldiers were advancing on multiple fronts, taking advantage of the confusion her long-range harassment had created. But the aliens still had massive numerical superiority, and once they reorganized, they would likely crush the human resistance. Alina selected a new target, a large transport that had just landed at the staging area. If she could destroy it before it unloaded its cargo, she might prevent fresh troops from reinforcing the alien ground forces. The shot was challenging at this distance, complicated by heat shimmer rising from the burning fuel depot. But Alina had trained for this kind of precision shooting her entire career. She adjusted for wind drift and thermal distortion, then squeezed the trigger. The transport exploded in a spectacular fireball as her exotic round found its fuel tanks. The secondary explosions spread to nearby vehicles, creating a chain reaction that sent shockwaves across the alien base. 3 rounds left, Alina murmured to herself, already scanning for her next target. Let's make them count. High above Earth's atmosphere, the Cathurian fleet waited in perfect formation. Admiral Zexter had transmitted his situation report an hour ago, and now the response came crackling through subspace from the Imperial High Command. "Admiral Zexter," the voice of Supreme Commander Ithak filled the bridge, its tone carrying the weight of absolute authority. Your report suggests that a single human has neutralized our ground operations. Explain how this is possible. Zexter's mandibles clicked nervously. Supreme Commander, the human appears to be using weaponry that incorporates our own exotic matter technology. Our intelligence reports made no mention of humans possessing such capabilities. Are you suggesting that one primitive human has reverse-engineered Cathurian military technology in the middle of a battlefield? That appears to be the case, sir. A long silence stretched across the communication channel. When the Supreme Commander spoke again, his voice carried a note of something that might have been respect. Show me the tactical data. Zexter transmitted the recorded footage from the surface battle. The Supreme Commander watched in silence as Alina's shots devastated the invasion force, each round placed with surgical precision across impossible distances. Remarkable, Ithak finally said. In 47 conquered worlds, we have never encountered an individual capable of such adaptation and skill. This human has taken our own technology and weaponized it against us in a matter of days. Yes, sir, what are your orders? Orbital bombardment. Sterilize the entire mountain range. On her rocky perch, Alina had resigned herself to death. She could hear the whine of aircraft engines growing closer, and she knew that eventually they would pinpoint her position and overwhelm her defenses. But when she looked through her scope at the staging area below, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The alien forces were in complete disarray. Smoke rose from a dozen different fires, and she could see troops abandoning their positions en masse. General Chen's counterattack was gaining momentum, and for the first time since the invasion began, human forces were advancing rather than retreating. Alina chambered her 10th and final exotic round. She had saved this shot for something special, something that would ensure the aliens remembered this day long after they finished their conquest of Earth. Through her scope, she could see a new ship descending from orbit, larger than the command vessel she had already crippled, with hull markings that suggested supreme authority. If she was reading the tactical situation correctly, this was likely the fleet admiral himself, come to personally oversee the suppression of one troublesome human sniper. The ship settled into a hover pattern 3 kilometers above the staging area, well outside the range of conventional human weapons. But Alina's hybrid rifle was far from conventional. She adjusted her scope for the extreme range and began calculating the shot. The target was moving in a slow circle, probably trying to assess the damage to ground operations while staying safely out of range. But Alina had learned something important during her mountain vigil. There was no such thing as safely out of range when humans refused to accept defeat. The wind was tricky at this altitude, gusting and shifting as it flowed around the mountain peaks. Alina waited patiently, watching the atmospheric conditions until she found her moment, a brief window when the air was still and the target was positioned perfectly. She fired her final exotic round. The projectile streaked across the 4-kilometer distance, its trail of ionized air visible even in daylight. Alina watched through her scope as the round punched through the ship's shielding and struck the bridge section. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The massive vessel lurched sideways, its anti-grav systems failing as critical systems overloaded. "That's for my planet," Alina whispered as the ship began its death spiral toward the ground. Admiral Zexter felt his flagship die around him as exotic energy cascaded through the bridge systems. Emergency lighting bathed everything in crimson as his staff struggled with damaged controls, but it was too late. The ship was falling, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. "Abandon ship," he commanded, but even as he said it, Zexter knew the truth. The human sniper had achieved the impossible. She had killed a fleet admiral with a single shot from extreme range. As his ship crashed into the mountainside below, Admiral Zexter's last conscious thought was a grudging admission of respect. Humans were far more dangerous than the Cathurian Empire had ever suspected. The destruction of the fleet flagship sent shockwaves through the remaining alien forces. Without unified command and facing an enemy that could apparently strike anywhere with impunity, the invasion force began a full retreat. Ships lifted off from landing zones across the planet, their crews more interested in escaping than maintaining their conquest. General Chen watched the retreat from his command bunker, hardly daring to believe what his sensors were telling him. The aliens were actually leaving. One woman with a rifle had accomplished what entire armies had failed to achieve. "Sir," Lieutenant Rodriguez said, his voice filled with awe, "we're getting reports from around the globe. The alien forces are withdrawing from all major population centers." "And Gunny Vasquez?" Rodriguez checked his communications panel, then shook his head sadly. "No response from Overwatch position. The aliens hit the mountain pretty hard before they retreated." Chen stared at the tactical display, watching the last alien ships disappear into the upper atmosphere. Earth was free, but the cost had been enormous. He made a mental note to recommend Elena Vasquez for every medal the military could bestow, posthumously, most likely. But as human rescue teams climbed toward Elena's last known position, they found something unexpected. Hidden among the rocks, protected by a shallow cave she had discovered during her final hours, was a small cache of equipment. Along with her conventional rifle and spent ammunition cases, they found a handwritten note. "To whoever finds this," the note read, "remember that humans don't surrender. We adapt, we improvise, we overcome. And sometimes, when everything seems hopeless, one person with the right motivation can change the course of history. The rifle components are in the equipment case. Study them, learn from them, make sure this never happens again. Semper Fi, Master Gunnery Sergeant Elena Vasquez, United States Marine Corps." Below the note, written in smaller text, was a final message. "P.S. I made it to the emergency shelter on the north face. Send coffee." 3 days later, rescue teams found Elena alive but unconscious in a natural cave system, suffering from exposure and dehydration but very much breathing. When she woke up in the field hospital, the first thing she asked for was her rifle. The second thing she asked for was a detailed report on alien military technology. Earth had won this battle, but Elena Vasquez was already preparing for the next war. After all, humans don't surrender. They adapt, improvise, and overcome. And sometimes, they make impossible shots that change the fate of worlds.